So here we have this S&S Super E carburetor. I'm gonna go through the whole carburetor. I'm gonna do my best to show you the parts and components to this carburetor. There's the part number for you. All right, I've already loosened some of the nuts and bolts on this. I've already taken the backing plate off. As you can see, it goes here. It's pretty self-explanatory. Those 3 bolts on that backing plate are pretty important. The reason they're important, I'm gonna explain. When they're screwed in, you need to put a little bit of blue Loctite on there, because if these back out, the place they go is right down inside of your carburetor, which then will dump right into your engine and you have catastrophic failure. So you definitely don't want that to happen. Tighten them down nice and tight, but don't tighten them down too tight, because this housing here can strip out, and that is the last thing you want to do, because then you'll end up having to replace the whole carburetor, and that's expensive. Those come out with a 3/16 Allen. Got some tools here. I've got your basic flathead screwdriver. I have a 5/8 inch open in box in wrench. I've got a pick, one of my favorite tools in the shop right here, and also just a small pair of little needle nose pliers. Also, we'll be using carburetor cleaner to clean a lot of the parts on this carburetor as we go. So let's go ahead and get started here. First things first, we'll name a few parts on this carburetor. This right here is the back portion of the carburetor. This is the portion that goes up to the intake manifold. You have your double throttle cable inputs, which does a push-pull motion on your butterfly valve here. I'll show you how that looks. Open, closed, open, closed. Now, getting in here and replacing all these parts, all these springs, sometimes you can get yourself into a bit of a pickle here, scarring and marring up this carburetor. This one seems to be working fine. It just needs to be cleaned. I'm gonna go ahead and replace this O-ring here that comes in our handy dandy kit. Also, another thing to note is the throttle cables that come on a stock CV carburetor with stock throttle cables will not work with an S&S carburetor. So you're gonna need to swap those out to S&S cables. Right here, you've got your enrichment portion. Now, this is not a choke. Oftentimes people will call this a choke. It is not a choke. This is called an enrichment. All it does when you flip that lever to start your bike is allows more fuel to go in there. If you run the bike for more than startup, we'll call it 20 seconds, with this on, you're going to foul your spark plugs. So do not run this for more than about 20 seconds or so. Air fuel mixture knob here. This, we're gonna go ahead and pull this completely out and reset that. Fuel intake. So this is where your fuel line plugs in and goes in and fills your float bowl. This right here is your float bowl drain, and underneath this is your main jet. This area right here is your accelerator pump. I'll explain that further when we open this up. Let's get into it and start at the top of the carburetor and take off our enrichment portion. 1/2 inch. Take this enrichment screw off. There's gonna be a spring under there, and under the spring is gonna be this plunger. This plunger is what allows fuel to come in and out of that enrichment area. So there's your enrichment. Next, we're gonna go ahead and pull out our air fuel mixture screw here. I just use a basic flathead for that. Now, oftentimes, people will attempt to adjust their air to fuel, not at this location, unfortunately. I'll show you here, this is nice and dirty, right there. Anyway, there's a spring on there. I'm gonna go ahead and keep that there. Mind you, we're gonna clean all these parts. But oftentimes, as I was saying, people will adjust this screw here, which is the accelerator pump screw. Don't adjust this one if you're trying to adjust or your air to fuel. you want to adjust this one, which is the one we just took out. So let's go ahead and flip the carburetor over now. Also, I'm going to note there are 3 screws here at the accelerator pump area. This screw here you can see is short. This screw here is short. This screw here is actually long, and you will not be able to pull the float bowl off unless this long one is out. So we're going to go ahead and pull this one first. A nice long screw there. And now we're going to go ahead and with a 5/8 we're going to pull off the float bowl drain plug. Get that out of our way. And under that, oh, let's note, there's a blue O-ring on there. Very important. Make sure that gets replaced. Should come with your kit. Inside there, you'll see is your main jet. Your main jet can be taken out with a simple flathead screwdriver. I'm actually going to go ahead and use my little bit bigger one here and pull that main jet out. We got that loose. We'll go ahead and back this main jet out. And that should fall right out, just like that. This is a little guy. I'll show it to you here. Here's your main jet. And on the edge, the very edge, you can see it is labeled with the size of jetting. This one here, I'm having a hard time reading. I'm gonna have to clean it, but that's your main jet. All right, now that we've got the long screw taken out, we've got our 3 float bowls taken out, we've got our float bowl drain plug taken out, we've got our main jet taken out, we can go ahead and take off our fuel inlet valve. Now these valves are made to spin and move. I've already loosened this one up. It's also a 5/8 inch. So go ahead and loosen that up. Take this guy out of here, and you'll note that there is a blue O-ring in there as well. Should be the same size as the one for the drain plug. Now, we're gonna go ahead and pull this off, float bowl. This is the lower part that holds all the fuel. All right. Hey, the inside of that's actually not looking as bad as I was expecting it to. I do definitely see some buildup and some gunk in there, but we'll clean that in a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at our float bowl. Now, there's a main gasket here, which our kit comes with a new one. We're gonna go ahead and remove this gasket. I can tell you right now, this thing is old. It looks like it's never been replaced. Noting, very important little blue O-ring on there. Very important. We're also going to replace that. All right, let's get this off. Now, inside here, I can see it's pretty dirty. We've got some buildup down inside there. Our little float piece was all cockeyed and off to the side. The way you get that all out is with a flathead. Pop this flathead off. Unscrew that, and this assembly should come apart pretty simple. There is the very, very important little piece here. This little guy right here, and I can already see that the bracket has been bent, but this little piece right here is what seals inside of our main fuel inlet. See how that seals right there? Funk. Now if that's off, too much fuel will come in and it'll dump out and you have issues. So with that being said, I can already see that that little bracket's bent. I am not getting this out, and I honestly don't want to force it because this, I can tell, is an older carburetor. I'm just going to leave it for right now, but I wanted to note a few things. When you twist your throttle, it activates the accelerator pump on this back side. There's a diaphragm in there, I'll show you in a moment, and it squirts fuel out of there and into the intake. I can also see that there's some old gasket left on here, which, if you can see, that's very important to get all that off. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes probably off camera doing some cleaning. Maybe I'll speed the camera up for that, but let's get into some other things here. See all that gunk on there? You can see that? Very dirty, very nasty. So we're gonna clean all that up. We're gonna clean these springs up. This is the accelerator pump boot. Ooh, look at that, look at that. Pull that rod out of there, look at that thing. That guy's seen better days, huh? Clean that off. This little rubber boot in here is gonna get replaced, so we'll go ahead and pull that. Oh, look at that, rubber boot's just literally falling apart. It's okay. Got my handy dandy pick here. We'll pull that piece out. That rubber boot is done. You can see it actually came out in 2 different pieces right there. So that's trash. Good thing the kit comes with a new one. There's the second part to it. Let's get to the accelerator pump side. Remember, we already pulled the long screw out, which is one of the other screws that holds the float bowl. So now we'll go ahead and pull these other 2 out. They should not be too tight, but just tight enough. Once this little accelerator pump is pulled off here, I'll show you the diaphragm and the spring inside. Very important little pieces here to keep track of. You do not want to lose. Oh, as it comes apart in my hand. All right, dirty, dirty, dirty. Gunked up old fuel. So we're gonna clean that. Inside here, we've got a little spring. And that spring is attached to this diaphragm, which is filthy, gunky, and disgusting. Got some very nasty old fuel buildup here. Look, it's falling apart right there. Powdered. And down in here, there's a ball. It's called a check valve. And there's another ball here with a spring under it. Very, very, very important that those go back exactly the way that they are. However, these little O-rings need to be in place, and they also need to be replaced. But there you have it. There's your disassembly. All your parts, all your pieces, the general makeup of a S&S Shorty E carburetor. I'm gonna clean everything up. I'm gonna replace all the gaskets, and we're gonna speed this video up for now because we're already getting on with time. We've got the carburetor completely pulled apart. I spent a while cleaning it out, scrubbing it out, getting all the gunk out, and looking it over, making sure the surface area where the gasket is gonna seat is clean. I made sure not to knock all the debris down inside these holes. I also use some air to blow them all out, just to make sure no pieces are down in there. I've already put the diaphragm and check ball valves back together and put the cover on here off camera. I'm gonna go ahead and replace these other ones that we've got. I've also cleaned the accelerator pump and all of these other. Got the float out, it was just stuck in there. This pin, it only goes in one way, so be aware of that, and we'll make sure and adjust that accordingly. We're gonna go ahead and put this thing back together, and let's start with the largest O-ring. This O-ring should pop down inside there pretty easily. It's a fitted O-ring. It's not something that needs to be stretched or manipulated too much. Just pressed down inside that channel. Let's move on to our accelerator pump boot. With a little bit of manipulation, it'll go on there. I'm gonna use a little flathead screwdriver to press down on the inside where my fingers don't fit. Just like that, we've got it on. All right. Moving on, we're gonna go ahead and replace this tiny little blue O-ring that goes over the accelerator pump right there. This important little part here, this portion of the hanger was bent pretty drastically, so I bent it back straight, as you can see there. We're going to go ahead and hang that on here like that, just like that, and drop this back in. Replace that set screw. Remember, it's a flathead set screw. None of this needs to be tightened down overly tight, just snug. And there's our float. Now we're going to go ahead and replace the fuel inlet valve. And we'll tighten that down with our 5/8 inch. Remembering that there is a O-ring in there. So tighten it down, but once again, it doesn't need to be overly tightened. Accelerator pump rod back in. There we go. Moves a lot more free now. Before I forget, your main jet goes in here, and this comes off with a 1/2 inch. Once you pull this off, you'll see you've got 5 holes right there, and this is all the way through. So clean this out real good, blow it out with air, and go ahead and seat that back in. Next is going to be your accelerator jet here. You can also unscrew that, just like so. Once you get that out, you'll see the same general effect. A little dirty, we'll go ahead and clean that up, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes there, and labeled the size of that jet. Go ahead and clean that out as well. And put that back in. None of this needs to be overly tightened to the point of gorilla. Okay, moving on. Main jet back in. And put the float bowl drain plug back on. That's a 5/8. Tighten that back down. There's an O-ring in there that'll seat. Got your float, actuator, plunger, retaining screw, and new O-ring on there. Place the gasket back on, making sure not to rip or tear the gasket. There you go, nice new gasket. Accelerator pump assembly back together. Drop that down in there. Make sure it seats. Drop your spring down on there. And last but not least, your screw that holds it all in place. That's a 1/2 inch. Tighten that down. Check operations. Works great. All right. We've also got our air to fuel mixture screw with that spring, nice and clean. Put that back in. Now, these are going to be adjusted later, but for now, you're going to go ahead and just tighten that down, finger tight, just until it seats right there, snug. Okay. All right, you're going to go ahead and line your float bowl pieces up here, just like so. Slide it together, and there you have it. Float bowls reassembled. Start with that long screw. That extra one that we talked about earlier needs to come out. It's the 4th one that holds the float bowl together. Don't tighten it down all the way just yet. Float bowl screws go into place here. Now there are some kits you can buy that replace these with longer ones. I think Lowbrow Customs sells a kit. But for For now, we're just gonna go with the stock flathead screws. Screw these back down. I always do them just snug to start. And then once they're all in place, evenly tighten them down. There should be lock washers on them that you'll feel go into place. And there you have it. You've got your accelerator pump all put back together. You've got your slide pin. You've got your butterfly valve operating correctly. Pressing down on your accelerator pump. You've got your fuel inlet valve connected. Main jet, float bowl secured. You've got your enrichment secured. And of course your air to fuel mixture. All right, now we're gonna set this carburetor up to what S&S calls your basic stock settings. Your air to fuel mixture screw is going to get tightened down just by hand till it seats. Then you're gonna take your screwdriver and you're gonna back it out 1.5 turns. Next, we're gonna move over to the idle speed screw. You wanna back that out until it just barely engages. Then, once it's just touching the throttle plate, you're gonna turn it 1/2 turn until it opens that throttle plate just slightly, right there. Turn the carburetor over, and we've got our accelerator pump side. Turn this screw in until it touches the accelerator pump plate lightly, and you're gonna back this screw out 2 full turns. 1, 2. That should be the stock adjustment for your S&S Super E carburetor. And at this point, your carburetor is ready to go back on the bike, making sure that you seal the intake manifold correctly and everything goes back in place nice and snug and straight. Setting your S&S carburetor to these stock settings will ensure that your bike will start and idle. However, there is a tuning process that needs to take place once you've got it installed. Up next, I've got some screenshots of parts and pieces of this carburetor, everything from nuts and bolts to O-rings and hoses, air filters, backing plate, intake manifold, and what they look like. I hope this information helps you guys to dig into your carburetors, rebuild them, clean them, and start working on them yourself. That's it for this video, MotoTubers. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like, share, and subscribe, and feel free to leave questions in the comments. I'll do my best to answer. Catch you next time.